This training is for the Waverly Central School District and is intended to comply with the New York State regulatory requirements on training for all staff in the topic area of workplace violence prevention. Workplace violence law is found in Labor Law, Section 27B, and the New York State Department of Labor regulations. This law went into effect on January 4th, 2024, and extended requirements to public employers in the state of New York. The purpose was to ensure that the risks of workplace assaults and homicides are evaluated, and there's a protection plan in place to prevent workplace violence or to minimize workplace violence. Workplace is defined as any location away from the employee's home domicile where an employee performs any work-related duties in the course of their employment. Workplace violence defined as any physical assault or acts of aggressive behavior occurring where a public employee performs these work-related duties. It includes but is not limited to an attempt or threat, whether verbal or physical, to inflict physical injury on an employee, any intentional display of force which would give an employee reason to fear or expect bodily harm, intentional and wrongful physical contact with a person without his or her consent that entails injury, and stalking of an employee with the intent of causing fear of material harm to the physical safety and health of an employee when stalking has arisen through and in the course of employment. So this is important to note. Workplace violence is a defined term, so you have to look for physical injury and anything that I just indicated by way of definition. Serious physical harm is defined as physical injury which creates a substantial risk of death or which causes death and serious and protracted disfigurement, protracted impairment of health, or protracted loss of impairment of functions of any bodily organ or sexual offense. Imminent danger is defined as any condition or practice in any place of employment which are such that a danger exists which could be reasonably expected to cause death or serious physical harm immediately or before the imminence of such danger can be eliminated through the enforcement procedures provided for by this part. Serious violation of the public employer workplace violence prevention program is either failure to implement the program or failure to address situations which could result in physical harm, serious physical harm. Retaliatory action is the discharge, suspension, demotion, penalization, or discrimination against an employee in the terms and conditions of employment. So requirements, what were school districts required to do when this new law came into effect in 2024? They have to develop a workplace violence policy statement. Yours in Waverly is located on your district's website. Secondly, the districts had to do a risk evaluation and determination. So all BOCES in the districts in New York State had to do an examination of records. They had to further assess policies, workplace practices, and procedures, and do an evaluation of physical environments. This is, in essence, included employee representatives, so your unions, whereby you'd walk through the workplace and determine which risk factors for workplace violence were present. Third, all school districts had to adopt a written workplace violence prevention program document. Fourth, all employees had to be trained, which this requirement is being met with by this very training. And record keeping. So school districts have forms that had to be developed. They had to have incident reports of workplace violence maintained, and an annual review of all these records has to be completed. So specifically at Waverly Central School District, looking at first and foremost your records examination, review of policies, practices, and procedures, what was done in Waverly. There was a review of SH 900, SH 900.1, and SH 900.2. Those are your work-related illness and injury reports, as well as your workers' compensation reports. It was determined in the last 12 months there were 8 work-related injuries, 7 of which were accidents, not violent conduct based, and 1 was a bite from a student to a staff member. The sexual harassment policy, a review of that at 6121 was done. It's a very thorough policy. It's compliant with New York State human rights law and Title IX. The visitors to on-campus policy, that's located at 3210. That includes a visitor protocol using a single entrance at the main entrance, the sign-ins, et cetera. Those processes are there in that policy document. Your student code of conduct was further reviewed. Your use of facilities policy for the public, those policies were reviewed, whereby there's procedures and safety issues are addressed in that policy. Fingerprinting and background checks for all employees, that policy was looked at, 6171 and 6170. Your visitor practices, sign in and sign out procedures was reviewed. Your practices of badge use via by all employees was reviewed. You have periodic safety walks, that was looked at, and the emergency response plan was also looked at. The risks after reviewing all this documentation, you have no visitor escort policy. So if you have a visitor come to a main office and their intended location in a building is the cafeteria, for instance, there's no escort from the office to the cafeteria, and there's no new hire picture that's sent out to all staff. So if you have new individuals coming to work for Waverly Central School District, you don't necessarily know who that face is until you meet them in person, and that could potentially pose a risk. Risk factors identified after doing your walkthroughs. First and foremost, at the Lincoln Elementary, there is no panic button. There's only 2 street lights on the sidewalk and crosswalk leading to the Center Street parking lot. Early morning and late evening custodial and cafeteria staff often work alone or in small groups. At Chemung Street building, there are only 2 lights on the walkway from playground to the parking lot, and the custodial staff also work those early morning hours. Risk factors at the Elm Street Elementary building, there's no panic button, poor lighting, particularly in the parking lot near the Spalding Street side. Public areas near the stadium also have poor lighting. The access road from the lower parking lot to the upper parking lot on the east side of the school additionally have poor lighting. Custodial staff and cafeteria, again, work those early morning hours alone or in small groups. And at the middle school, high school building, their custodial and cafeteria staff, again, work those early morning hours. Parking lots lack adequate lighting, especially the rear parking lot of the building, and stairwells do not have surveillance cameras. So ways to potentially mitigate these risks in the interim before, for instance, additional lighting could be installed. These are things right now that all staff can be aware of and undertake. All buildings, if there's no panic alarms or door alarms, be cognizant of your surroundings and visitors to your building. If you see someone you don't know, check in with somebody, a principal, the main office, etc. All buildings, if you're working alone or late, use designated communication devices. So if you have a phone, a radio, or the classroom phones, know the appropriate emergency contacts and whom to call, 911, and then your principals or your director of facility. All buildings, if you're collecting money, ensure protocols in place for securing money in a non-publicly visible place, so where it's hidden, where it's not obvious. All buildings always comply with the established emergency response procedures provided to every employee. And the district already has these procedures in play right now. We have established emergency response procedures. We have drills that are done multiple times a year. The district has those issued badges where they should be worn and visibly invisible to everyone. The district has had the maintenance team, O&M, address several minor issues in the buildings over the summer months, such as making sure light bulbs are replaced and make sure there's adequate lighting. The district has updated lighting as part of its capital project. So again, some of the areas have received additional lighting, and the district uses cameras to actively monitor access to buildings. So once a visitor comes in, we can kind of track where they're going to, for the most part. And the location of written workplace violence prevention document, just be aware, again, if you want to receive additional information, look at your district's website. And then your contact, of course, is Superintendent Knowles for further information. Thank you.